Hi, everyone. Welcome to A4 Insider Commercial Casting for Actors with Isis Masoud. We are going to get started now. So just a couple housekeeping items. If during the first part of during the presentation while I'm giving remarks, if we could all just keep ourselves muted, and you can keep your cameras on or off during this time, but just um, to keep things clear and streamlined, we will, um, yeah, if you could keep yourselves muted, that'd be great. We will also be recording this program and posting to YouTube afterwards and sending to all registrants. So if you have to hop off early or you want to review what was covered later on, you'll be able to do that. Um, and I'm just going to give a brief intro about A4. So, if you're not familiar, sorry, I'm trying to avoid this little sunbeam that keeps following me. Um, we are a 43-year-old nonprofit organization that serves and uplifts AAPI artists and cultural workers and organizations across disciplines. And we do that through programming like this, professional development, helping you all learn about, learn from experts, the insides and outs of the industries that you are a part of. And so A4 Insider is actually one of our newest offerings. We recognize that we wanted to make our programming more accessible to folks, so we made this program online, virtual, so that more people could join us. And we're going to be doing something like we're going to be doing A4 Insider every other month, moving from discipline to discipline, and we're kicking things off with acting because we heard from a lot of our actors, who were seeking insights about the industry. It can sometimes be overwhelming. It can sometimes be, yeah, it can feel like a lot to navigate, especially if you're just getting started. So yeah, with that, oh, I should also mention that it just so happens that A4 has a survey where we all need all of your input. I'm going to flash a QR code now on the screen. But essentially, if you could sometime today or tomorrow, if you could just give us your feedback, we are sending it far and wide. It's just for A4 to get a sense of what your needs are, and what we're doing well, what we can improve on. It will actually shape A4's programming for the next few years. So really, really would appreciate your feedback. And I'm going to flash the QR code now, and I'll also be sending it to you all afterwards. Let me just play this here.
Yeah, and just so you know, this program is a direct result of feedback that we got from artists. So please let us know so we can create more programs to suit your needs.
Yes, thank you all. I'm going to keep this on the screen for a few seconds as I keep talking. Um, so the agenda is really straightforward today. We're going to have like a 5 to 10 minute presentation from Isis, who will introduce herself and a little bit about her background and the casting process. And then we're going to open it up for questions. We did receive your pre-submitted questions, and Isis will do her best to answer all of those, but also, of course, real-time questions as well. So, with that, I am going to introduce Isis. Isis Masoud is an independent casting director who has spent over a decade casting major commercial campaigns for brands like Apple, Visa, Disney, and Google. And she herself is a creative, direct actor, dancer, director, producer, and a member of the Casting Society of America. So Isis really understands both sides of the audition room, and what will make talent truly stand out. So I just want to first of all thank Isis for being here with us today and sharing your wisdom. And I'm gonna hand it off to you.
All right. Well, you guys, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I am so excited to meet all of you. Okay, sorry, I think I'm still looking at the screen share. Oh, there we go. Now I can kind of see folks. Hold on, I'm gonna change my view because I think I'm just spotlighted. But okay, I'll just try to look as many of you as possible. So thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I have a long background and story, and I always have followed my curiosity as an
需要你
artist.
一下，我把手弄脏了，需要你那个。
Oh, can folks please stay muted?
That's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I've always just followed my curiosity as an artist, and it's taken me all over the story landscape. First as an actress, when I was a kid, I still continued to audition for film and TV projects. And then I started writing and directing my own stuff just because as an actress, I kind of felt like, well, I could be auditioning till the end of time. And I wasn't necessarily getting the types of roles that I was really excited to play. So I was like, well, I'll just write and direct and produce my own stuff. So I worked with other actors and other collaborators and making my own short films, which really helped to give me an understanding of how things work behind the camera. And then later I got into casting. So then I got a much more fleshed out and deeper understanding of what the casting process looks like. And now I work a lot also in the nonfiction space because I just love real, true, and meaningful human stories. So I'm a little bit all over the map. I still write my own stuff and I still audition and then, of course, my bread and butter is casting. So that's kind of my background. I did have a very full dance career and worked very much as a choreographer. And I did a lot of dance films as well, because for me, that was also a way to tell stories and to forge connections with audiences and have a voice in that way. So that's kind of my background. I can share a little bit about what things look like on the other side of the table and a few insights, but I would love to spend most of my time today on questions and just making sure that any burning questions that you guys have, that I get them answered, and that usually will get other people's ideas and brains going about other questions that they have. So one thing I will say as someone who's an actor and then also on the other side with commercials is that it's really important that you understand that the casting directors are on your side. I think we, as cast on the casting side of it, we are always rooting for you guys. We are always looking for the best talent. And pretty much every project that I have ever cast, I've had way more extraordinary options than I had roles to fill. So it's like it always gets down to the end where we're like, okay, we love these five people and we can only book one. And then how do we choose, right? And I say we, but it's typically not the casting director that chooses. The casting director, it's our job to work as a filter and provide options that are aligned with what the director and the client and the agency and the producer are looking for. And then they will start to decide who it is they ultimately want to cast. And many times the final decision comes down to not who was the very best or who was the most talented, because we usually get to a point, like I said, where there's like five excellent choices. And then it becomes more about the puzzle piece and the overall, you know, the overall big picture of all of the people and faces that are going to be working together. So on the commercial side, I do a lot of montage spots, and representation is really important to clients and agencies these days, as it should be. And that's one thing I love. So often in a montage spot, they're very much about like, okay, do we have representation for older people and younger people and Asian people and Black people and people with disabilities and, all of the different religions. Like they really try to make sure that there is a level of diversity there. And so sometimes the final choices end up becoming about creating that balance, not who is the most excellent. And we always have, it's never just like one person who's the most excellent. It's always like we've got five or six or sometimes 10. And so that's why as casting directors, we have this like crazy Rolodex that just like sits in our brain of like, oh my gosh, I loved this person, but we couldn't get them in on the last one. And we always tell them like, we'll circle back when we have something else that you're right for. And it's often very specific what we are looking for. And sometimes I have circled back to talent on projects where I reach out to them a year later and they're like, oh, I thought that was just a thing that you say that you'll keep me in mind for future projects. And I'm like, no, no, it's real. We come back to them a year later because we almost got them on one project and then it didn't work out for one reason or another. And then I book them on the next project. They're like, oh, I didn't really think that was like a thing that you do. Um, and like the woman actually who told us that now I've booked her on 3 different projects, which is like good for her. And oftentimes it's a little bit serendipity. Sometimes it's timing. Sometimes it's like I happen to be casting for a very specific type of role that keeps coming up. This year, for example, this casting spec has come up 3 projects in a row where I'm casting for a family with 3 boys that are in the age pocket of like infant, toddler, 5 to 7 year old kid, because on these 3 projects they've been it's a story of one boy that takes place over time. So the idea of having brothers is great casting because they all ideally look alike. And then it's easy to, for them to portray the same person over time. So that's interesting. I'm like, okay, I've never had that spec before. And now that's come up 3 times in a row. So yeah, and sometimes the casting specs are so specific because I tell people all the time, a casting director, and people are like, oh yeah, like I want to be in a commercial. And then it's like, well, if I have something for you, and what does that mean? If I have something for you, like I have had to cast commercials with sometimes the most detailed types of people that they are looking for. For example, I worked on a Volvo branded series where they made 4 episodes where they were looking for real Volvo owners. And the project started out as, we're looking for real Volvo owners. And then it got very highly specific with places that they live and job types and, gender and all of that stuff, because they really try to, like I said, it's nice to sort of round out, the casting for, representation. So it can be very, very specific. So, yes. So it's always good to stay on a casting director's radar. This is another thing that I wanted to share with you guys because I think it's a question a lot of people have. It's like, well, how do you build relationships with casting directors? And I think there's a couple of ways. And I think, there's a couple rules to follow. One, you always want to be kind. Um, you never want to be like pushy or rude. I can sometimes, see actors will create narratives about why they're not getting called in or why they haven't like booked something. And, casting directors have less control than people might think. So I think like being kind, I think also like if they're on Instagram or something, you can engage with their content. You can, leave, comments or messages. And I think also too, if you do have a specific, at least for me, if there is something about you that is very specific that I might be casting for, whether it's a special skill or you speak different languages, you play a specific sport, or you're a musician, or you sing, or you dance, like I think those things have a lot of value for me because I am often tasked with casting a real chef, right? Because I think right now, in terms of the industry as a whole, and especially in commercial, I think people are really leaning into authenticity because audiences are just too smart to know when people are faking something. If you're a real, like, I grew up as a dancer and I was always frustrated when I watched films with all of these body doubles because I was like, I know that's a body double, like you're not fooling anybody. And it would just like pull me out of the story entirely. And I couldn't suspend my disbelief because it was just so obvious. And then after So You Think You Can Dance came about, audiences really became educated about dance. And then nobody could really be fooled. And now body doubles aren't really a thing in the same way that they used to be. I mean, sure, if there's some sort of extreme stunt, but in terms of like dance stories, they're mostly hiring dancers, which I love to see. And I think that, the same thing is happening across casting. So if I'm casting for a real chef, if the role is a chef, like it's easier to just hire a real chef because an actor can't prepare, in a week or 2 weeks whenever it's shooting to get in their bodies the decades of experience if they're the strength that they're like flicking a wok with or the speed which with their cutting vegetables and their knife skills are so fine-tuned from decades, right? And it's the same thing, like, yes, exactly, the muscle memory if we're casting for athletes, if we're casting for yes, I said dancers, singers, like all of anything that takes like a deep skill set. I cast a project where the story was about ranchers and farmers. It's like if you've never worked with 32 cattle before, like we're not going to hire an actor to learn how to do that in a week's time, if that makes sense. And I think also too, just in terms of the industry as a whole, the more content is being made with AI, and there's a lot of kind of slop out there as a result, I think the more audiences are going to feel the connection to real humans, real stories, real actors, if that makes sense. So that's something I love to share. And so just to hit home on the point about like specific um, skills that you might have. There are definitely projects that I've seen out in the world on the narrative side where they're like, we need someone that speaks German. We need someone who's, indigenous. We need someone who speaks, Chinese, Korean, Spanish. So those things are very specific. And then when somebody knows that that is your skill set and the casting director is aware, you are going to be the first person that they think of. So I would urge you guys to start really thinking about what are the things that are really unique to you, like what is special and different and interesting about you that makes you the right person when it comes to casting a project. And I think about skill sets, but I also think about in terms of your look and like matching. Oftentimes, like I've been tasked with having to match people that might look like a real person, a historical figure, a celebrity or something. So if there's anyone that people say to you, like, oh my gosh, you look like Leah Michelle or whatever. There's an actress that I know in another mentorship program. I'm like, girl, you look just like Leah Michelle. I was like, you need to just know that when you're auditioning for things. Um, so I think those are things that to think about. I also think that it's really important that you get your materials in the best shape possible, because acting is a business and your headshot, your resume, pulling a reel together, your LinkedIn page, your Instagram are all entry points for people to learn about who you are and what you do. And so having those materials be as representative of you as possible, the easier it makes for casting and for directors to pinpoint, like, oh, this is the right person for this particular role, if that makes sense. So I've given you guys a lot of information. Um, do we want to jump into taking questions or do we want to chat through some of our previously submitted questions?
What do you, I mean, I think that you answered a lot of questions that were in the pre-submitted questions. Were there any, we could also just open it up at this point. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's open it up. And then if you did submit a question, then you can resubmit it. Do we want to just read through the questions in the chat? How do you want to run it, Justine?
Yeah, I was
Raising
thinking that
hands.
we could invite folks to raise their hands physically or through the Zoom feature, and then we'll just go in the order. I'll just name the people that I'm seeing. If you don't mind, I might have to remove the spotlight to see if you
Yeah,
could.
that's great. Then I can see everybody.
Oh, Justine, are you frozen? Oh, you dropped. So let's start with Aisha, and then Emily, and then Meryl. So Aisha, you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Lisa. And thank you again for doing this. So my question is, for someone like me, I'm very in between. I'm very ambiguous. I'm not brown enough to be brown. I'm not white enough to be white. I'm kind of like in that in between phase. So when casting directors are looking for people, how, and like I have no idea when they ask, well, what checkbox do you check off? And I have no idea where to even begin.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a really great question. And I really feel you too. My mom's American. My dad is from Egypt. Some people see me as white. Some people see me as brown. And then, it brings up all sorts of other identity questions. And so I totally feel you. Sometimes ambiguous is really great for commercial auditions because more people are going to identify with like what you look like. I would say, depending on what the audition is, if it's for film and TV and they're looking for um, a specific ethnicity that you identify with or that lives in your heritage, I think you can lean into that with costuming, with wardrobe, with how you wear your hair. It's like if the role for me is Middle Eastern and I am going out for something Middle Eastern, I might do my eye makeup a little bit different because in Egypt they tend to wear, a nice like darker eyeliner and it makes my eyes look bigger, which is like one of my more Egyptian traits. And so I can lean into it that way. I guess I would also ask you, do you speak another language? Are there any other languages?
Yeah, Urdu, Hindi, French, English. Yeah.
Okay, so that is also really important because that also just sets you aside. So, for example, if you are ever involved in student films or like working on putting together like reel clips or even some self tapes, I think it's good to try to integrate some of those other languages that you speak because if I'm ever casting for someone that speaks Urdu, I'm gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna reach out because I don't have a plethora, right, of options. And so just making sure that that's like at the top of your resume, making sure that you've got some self tapes or some reel clips. And so that's another way to help casting see you in that way. And there's also it's interesting too the way that sometimes projects made in America might depict people from other places. Like when I'm in Egypt and I'm hanging out with my Egyptian cousins, it's interesting because they just happen to be light skin and many Egyptians there think they are American
Mhm.
just because they are lighter than me. So, there's a lot of conversation now about like race and representation and this and that. And I also think it's a good question, like for yourself, like how do you identify and then bringing yourself to your work. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Thank you. Mhm.
Thanks, Masood. And next we have Emily and
Hey,
then Meryl.
Isis.
Hey,
Oh,
Emily.
hello. I am just starting out in my journey. Excuse me. And while I'm finding the specific interest or niche that I have, I do want to showcase the different skill sets that I have. Like I can sing, I can dance, I do a little comedy. And I'm wondering how to showcase that. Like, are those different reels? Is that all one reel? And also if you have any tips for like how many looks or headshots is standard, kind of a what someone starting out should have on
Yeah.
their plate.
Okay, so if you're just starting out, I would focus on your headshots first before you get to the reels because you can get work in auditions with just headshots without necessarily having the reel. I think the reels are great and they're amazing and they're kind of like the second, like step two, I think, or like step three even. So I would just one ask yourself what are the types of roles that you want to play, and then what are the types of roles that you think you are right for. And then you want to have a couple of different headshot looks that reflect that, right? And if you're just starting out for film and TV, we'll talk film and TV and we'll talk commercial because they're like a little bit different. But for film and TV, the auditions that you're going to be going out for in the beginning are going to be co-star roles, a lot of one-liners and under fives. And so some of those roles are more like, like the nurse or like the teacher, or, think about, you know, what those roles are and what are the things that you think you could play at that at that sort of like entry point level. And then you want to get headshots that reflect that. Like for me, I go out for like, detectives, lawyer. I also go out for like the mom, the I don't know, the lady that sells essential oils at the store who's kind of like a hippie, or the therapist or something, a lot of kind of like compassionate roles. So I have different headshots that reflect that. So like my detective and my lawyer is a little bit stronger, a little bit, a different outfit than say like when I go in for a nurse. And so I'd say like step one, depending on what market you live in, where are you based?
I'm in New York.
Okay, New York, great. So lots of wonderful photographers that you can work with there. What I like to have a spreadsheet for everything. So I would say like do some research, start looking up headshot photographers, start looking online for actors that you admire, start going through IMDb and looking at the headshots that you like. And I, build out a spreadsheet of at least like 5 photographers, links to their websites, reach out to them to find out like what their rates are per look. There's some photographers, there's one in New York specifically that will do a discount if you bring a friend. It's like bring a friend and you guys get like, 50% off or whatever for more time, or, figure out which photographer is going to work best for you in terms of like style, number of looks, and like rate. And I would say that's like kind of your like very step one. And the immediate step after that is to just make sure that you're on both casting networks and Actors Access. Casting networks is where like most of the commercial stuff comes through. There's also now casting.com and Actors Access. Yeah. And then, so sorry, just to answer your last question, I know I said reels are kind of a step two, but I think once you start, if you are at the stage where you're getting auditions and self-tapes, I think you, when it comes to self-tapes, you don't necessarily want to put them online unless you have already like uh booked them and the project has aired, but you can have self-tapes on the back end of your actors access for stuff that you have not booked that is there that casting directors can look at. And then I would say if you are social media savvy, there are plenty of actors that have just built out a social media presence, like doing comedy stuff, doing like little skits, like Caitlin Reilly, she's a great example of like she would just do these like skits, or like Jason Firstman, and their Instagrams took off. And, now I see Caitlin in a lot of these types of roles in prestige TV shows that were, kind of comedy skits that she was doing on her Instagram. And the same thing, like with your dance, like all of that is helpful to have up on there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, I think Merle is next. Merle?
Oh, hi. Hey,
Hi,
Isis. Good
Meryl.
to see you, honey.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Oh, of course, of course. So listen, Isis, I guess I never really asked you because, obviously I know you from the mentorship programs, but do you just are you just booking in the Southeast, or you do all over? And also, are they just the reality shows, or what kind of projects? Because I know you always want real people, so I'm figuring that's just reality shows, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Meryl. I do cast nationwide and occasionally abroad. I've cast spots also in France and Canada,
Wow.
but primarily across the US, not as much in South Florida as I like, but often like New York, Los Angeles, Bay Area, Atlanta. Got a couple in the pipeline potentially for Austin, Texas. So I do work all over the US, and my projects that are all over the US are primarily commercial projects, typically in the real people space. And when I say real people, we do always, of course, consider actors and get actors into the mix, especially if it's a SAG job. SAG jobs are required to look at actors, but it often, like, the Venn diagram has to be right. So if I'm looking for, if I'm doing a Dick's Sporting Goods commercial and we need real basketball players, I am both going to look at reach out to all the basketball teams and, ask the agents and the actors, like, do you have anyone that played basketball in high school or anyone who plays basketball recreationally? And so if they really play basketball and they're an actor, then great, like let's get them in. But again, it's like audiences I think are too smart to be like, okay, that person hasn't spent very much time with the basketball, so if that makes sense. So that's like my primary. I do also cast, some like independent film stuff as well, on the narrative side, but not quite as often. That
But
answers your
but
question.
what you so it sounds like you do it across all the genres, but your specialty is looking for people who the real people that do these things that they really with the special skills or whatever, right? That's what
Yes.
you do,
Yeah,
right? That's
exactly. So I know you play pickleball, so I always
well,
think
of
about that.
course.
I'm like, if I ever get a pickleball
I know
request, I'm
you'll
gonna
never
call you.
forget. I
Yeah.
know that, but and swimming too. But great,
Okay, good to
awesome,
know.
sweetie. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Right. I think we have
Rain.
is Scenic Rain. Rain is next. Yeah.
Hello. So my question was, how do you approach self-tapes for commercials versus like TV film? Do you feel like that process is a little different? Because I've been able to book like TV film and theater, but I haven't booked a commercial yet. And I noticed that like the materials they send are a little bit different. So I was just trying to see if there's like what your like first steps for like tackling the self-tape for commercials would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are completely different. I think with film and TV, there's a lot of it's about the story. There's like a beginning and a middle
Yeah.
and end,
It-
and I think it's a lot more about like, is this person right for the role and the storytelling and the level of their talent and their skill. And I think commercial, a lot of times comes down to more of a look because they don't have to carry as much of the story. It's
yeah.
like it's a 30-second spot.
Mhm.
Um, or a 60-second spot, and they're not often as like story forward. So in terms of the self-tapes, it really depends on the project. I would say when you get a request for a commercial self-tape, first thing is like look at the director and then go online and look at the director's work, right? So there's a handful of directors I work with that are very much in the doc space and they like want you to be as you are, like who you are. So for them, it's like, they don't want a lot of makeup. They want to see you just be yourself. They want to see you in your regular clothes. They want to see, you just like in your environment. And so for anything that comes through as like a doc style or in the real people space, they're looking for real families or real whatever. You really just want to think about how can I be myself? How can I let go of any preconceived notions about what I think they are looking for? And then just be myself. And like those are the people that we are most likely to select because they're just so grounded and so honest and here I am. And they may not be 100% right for a project, but then we'll think of them for the next one where they are 100% right. So I think on the real people side. And so on the real people side, often we'll have them answer questions, maybe they'll have them submit a self-tape. And for that, it's like you can just sit on the couch and talk to us. You don't need to put up your blue background. You don't need to do your makeup perfect. And then there's these other types of commercials that are a little slightly more presentational, where they're looking for people that are a little bit more polished, and you want to spend a little bit more time on your hair and your makeup and choosing your outfit. And so I think in terms of those self tapes, you do want them to be as polished as possible with like the right lighting and the right framing and the right, like I said, visual representation, and think about your outfit and is your outfit representative like of the brand. And I think it does again start with research. So if you get a commercial for like Home Depot, then you should like look up previous Home Depot commercials and see what they're wearing and see how their hair is and see how their delivery is. Because even though they might work with different directors, there is going to be a consistency because you're still having the client and the agency that are making a lot of those, creative decisions, of course, with the director. So does that answer the
Yes,
question
thank
a
you.
little bit?
That was really good. And just a little quick question. I was wondering what if your special skill doesn't exactly match with your look type? For example, like I've played baseball for over 15 years, so and like been in 5 different national and international tournaments, but uh like I'm short, so it's like helped me to book things and like get me in the door, but then I've had instances where it's like once they see like my whole body, then they're like, "Oh, you don't look like an athletic type." But when they see me actually playing baseball, like they see my experience. So I was wondering what I can kind of do with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, a lot of the commercials I cast would just lean so much more into authenticity. And so it wouldn't really matter if you fit a type because we're not super concerned with that on our end. We're like, oh, well, Rain is a real baseball player, and what we're looking for is a real baseball player, and they're really great at baseball. And that would be enough for us
Mm,
because on our end, like, we love, breaking stereotypes. We love, you know, getting someone on screen that wouldn't typically be chosen if it was like a regular, you know, commercial that's
mm.
attached to like these different types. From our end, that's one of our like preferences. So again, like I wouldn't worry too much about that. And
Okay.
I would just bring yourself authentically as much as you can to these roles. And it's a numbers game too. And then the more you audition, and then eventually you'll book.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's like a really cool thing that you guys are doing.
Great. Next we have George's. George's, if you'd like to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, my question is, it's kind of like a two-part question. I wanted to know, if I missed this, my apologies, but how do we get into do you have like your own files? Like, can we actually go to a website or is it just Instagram and just send you our pictures and things like that? And the other part of my question is, I wanted to know about the international working, like the international part of it. Um, how does that work? Because a lot of the times, like it's so complicated, so you end up working for free because if they do pay you, then it's an entire different, like if they pay you, then you don't have the visa or you don't have this or they can't sponsor you or something like that. So if there's any money exchange, it becomes complicated. And so they don't want to deal with it. So what are your suggestions?
Okay, well, the first question I would say, I'll share since this is going live on the internet later because it's being recorded, I won't share my email here, but I'll share it. Um, I'll share it with A4 and then they can get that. Or Justine, she can share with you guys and you can send me your headshots and resumes. In terms of like international, it really varies from job to job. I think one, as an actor, you always want to have your passport ready. I have friends that booked jobs and they did not have their passport ready and it was supposed to fly out of town for cruise ships or Caribbean or whatever and then had to give up the job. And oftentimes these cruise ship jobs pay really well if it's commercial because you're out there for a week and they have to pay you every day and you're traveling and it's per diem and then there's a buyout. And so I've definitely seen that happen. So just like be prepared with your passport. And then in terms of, the narrative that you're sharing about things being free and not, I would say just be a little bit weary of that because there are often projects that cast here that shoot other places. And then sometimes when I'm casting abroad, we're casting abroad and we're looking for locals in that place. It varies from project to project. But I would definitely ask questions or do your research and have some conversations before you jump into anything that feels like it's not they're not paying you appropriately to travel and you shouldn't be coming out of your pocket to travel unless it's like in the US and they are stating it's a major market and that they're stating that it's they're requesting local hire. So for example, Atlanta happens to be a very big market and oftentimes they're looking for local hires for some of the smaller roles. But if it's a show that's been around for a long time, like Will Trent is in its fourth season now. So if you've already been on that show, you can't necessarily be on it again. They can't recycle actors like that. So they might be looking for people in Florida or Tennessee or, North Carolina that it's just within driving distance and can work as a local hire, if that makes sense. Um, but other than that, yeah, I would just be weary of any opportunity that just doesn't feel like it's compensating people appropriately.
So while we're on the question of local hires, can I actually can I actually, if I'm selected or sent the casting and it says local hires Florida and I'm in New York, can I actually say that, submit for that?
Yeah, you can. You can, I think you can submit as long as you're honest about where you are and that you are willing to get yourself there. One thing I will say is that on the casting side, sometimes I have people that are like, "I'll work as a local hire." And I'm like, "Okay, great, I'll get them in. They're really perfect for it." And they were planning to fly in from Los Angeles or Puerto Rico, for example. And then by the time they book the job is now a week out. And those flights that they looked at when they were auditioning 3 weeks ago are now a lot more expensive 1 week out. So sometimes on the casting side, we get a little bit nervous if someone actually has to fly in. And because we don't want to get to a point where suddenly, and this has happened, where it's like, oh, I'll work as a local hire. And then suddenly they're like, oh, that flight. Well, when I looked before, it was 200 and now it's like 800. And by the time they do the math on what they're making on the job, they realize that just like might not be worth it. So sometimes we get a little bit nervous about that. So I would say New York to Florida is like a quick trip, and there's a lot of, flights that are basically affordable. But sometimes it's nice to just say, like, I have family in Florida. I always have a place to stay. And so then we understand that the cost of travel isn't necessarily going to tip the balance for you, and you might like back out. It's just you want, but on the other side of it, if I'm casting a project that I know is a drive away, like it's like you hop in the car, even if it's a 6 hour drive or a 7 hour drive, I'm like, okay, they can drive here. Then I feel a little bit more comfortable about it. And then sometimes I will say, and this happened on a recent job, we were looking for locals to Los Angeles. There was a talent in Texas that submitted that that originally, wasn't quite in the mix because we were like, oh, they're in Texas. But then once we cast the two matching boys, this is like the matching that I was telling you about. This kid was just like a perfect match. So then they became the top choice, even though they weren't based in Los Angeles. And then client ended up covering all the, cost of travel and accommodations and everything else. So, I would say when in doubt, just submit and be honest. If that helps.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great. Next we have Yunpa. Yunpa, do you want to unmute and ask your question? Is Yunpa still here?
Yes,
If
hi.
Great.
I have a question about the pictures in the resume for the headshot. If I had a lot of cosmetic surgery and I want it to be as representative as possible, is it possible to send a picture of the way I looked before I had cosmetic surgery, or would that be considered misleading?
Yeah, I think people just want to know what you look like, exactly what you look like now, which is why oftentimes we will ask for, sometimes on the real people side, we'll say no headshots. Take a picture, take a selfie with your cell phone of exactly where you are now, step outside so you have some good lighting and send that over. And even for film and TV and traditional commercials, they'll also often ask for immediate digitals of like what you're wearing today, what you look like today. Because I also think that even with cosmetic surgery, I have seen breakdowns go out where they're actually looking for someone who's had a lot of cosmetic surgery. So I would just say that, like, whoever you are, stand confident in who you are and know that there's going to be a role that comes up that is specific for you, even if you don't think it matches standards, because standards are changing all of the time. And there's no way that you would be able to just get inside every single director and casting director and client's mind to know precisely what they're looking for. And even with directors that I've worked with for a very long time, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to love this person. And someone else that I didn't think would be their favorite is suddenly their favorite. And even though I have experience about their preferences, it's like they saw something in that person that they loved. And most of the time, it comes down to who they are and not necessarily always like what they look like, even though that is a piece of the puzzle. So you always want
Uh,
to submit photos of what you actually look like.
all right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, and no filtered photos. People send filtered photos, and then I have to reach back out to them and be like, okay, no filtered photos. We need to know like what you look like.
It would be awesome if there was a DNA camera or something that would show the original face of everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Inka. Next, we have Phoenix and then Sophia. Phoenix?
Hi, Isis. Nice to meet you. The question that I had, how has becoming a casting director or working in casting changed the way that you audition, if any? I think it's cool that you're also an actor, so
Yeah, a
if it
really
has
great
changed.
question. So it's interesting because I do for casting, I primarily work on the commercial side and a little bit in indie film. And then on the audition side, I primarily audition for film and TV. And I think maybe because I work in commercials on the casting side, the film and TV thing is just way more fulfilling for me as an actor. In terms of the audition process, because I think you have to love the audition process. And if you don't love the audition process, it'll be hard for you to sustain in the industry. Whereas, like, if you can get up and do an audition and be like, great, I had an audition today, I had so much fun doing it, and then you just forget about it, I think that's when you're most likely to book because then you'll just be able to do it over and over and over again. And so, yeah. So one thing that has helped me the most from being on the other side of it is all the mind frame stuff. Because a lot of times as an actor, you're just auditioning, you send out your tapes, you never hear back, you never know, the actor that like, barely was considered at all, or the actor that made it all the way to the end and was down between like three people, like they don't know where they sit in that pile. And so I
Mm,
think it's very easy as actors to start creating narratives about like I'm not good or they don't like me or I'm never going to make it, or like it's very easy to just jump on the sort of like downer bandwagon and create these negative mind frames. And now being on the other side of it from the casting side, I really understand sometimes that it's not about always the most talented or always the most excellent. I've definitely been in situations on the casting side where we the casting spec changed last minute, either age or ethnicity or something got added or something got taken away, written in, written out. And then we needed somebody fast. And it was like, okay, the first three people in got considered and we picked like, we just didn't spend so much time like thinking about it. And then I've also seen decisions get made that were, not necessarily arbitrary, but weren't about like, the talent because we had, like I said, six people that could have done it, and then they were just deciding about how they fit into the puzzle and towards in terms of just like age, ethnicity, etc. So I would say like mind frame. The mind
mm,
frame is the biggest thing I think that we all need to keep in check of just like keep showing up. Even if you have a bad audition day or you think you didn't have your best audition, like let that go because quite honestly, like your audition, if you did 5 takes, probably the difference between your first one and your last one aren't like that different because you still are who you are, even if your performance may have gotten better between the first and the fifth takes or whatever. So like just don't be hard on yourself. Be proud that you like got up and you did the audition. Be excited if you get to a stage of like I'm not getting auditions to like now I'm getting a bunch of auditions. Even if you're not booking, you're still get making progress because you got a bunch of auditions. So I think like the mind frame thing is really key. Um, and don't stress yourself out too much about like trying to think why you weren't chosen because it's always a bunch of stuff that's just completely out of your control. And the only thing you can do is stay on top of your craft, keep taking acting classes, keep taking workshops like these, keep learning, keep auditioning, keep finding little ways to up your game. And I think also too, like these casting director workshops are also really helpful too. There's a lot of casting director workshops out there, like one-to-one actors connection, AVS studios where you get to submit self-tapes or you get to do Zoom reads and they get to give you feedback and you get to get your work in front of them. And when you do that, like they will remember you. And then oftentimes after those workshops, they give you permission to stay in touch.
mm. Thank you for that. I feel like the mindset part of just like knowing that you're seeing it from like all sides is like, thank you. That's like a big takeaway for me in this of like,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's huge. That's been the biggest shift for me, I think. Yeah,
Mhm.
great question.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have Sophia next and then Cami. Sophia, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm mixed as well, and I am like in an interesting point in my career because I've had a lot of commercial success on my own and then also like with agents. I'm been SAG eligible since 2019, but I didn't join because of, it's like there's just so much non-union work. So my bread and butter actually comes from commercials, which is great, but it's not necessarily like where I want to be acting like forever because like, I have a degree in acting. And like I really want to be in film and TV, and I also like want to hone in on my comedy and like be doing more than like improvised auditions based on like specs and like, self tapes do like yesterday that you got today. So I just spent the last 4 years working on a really big project. I did my one woman show at La Mama, which was, yeah, thank you, which was about being mixed, about being Italian Mongolian, about being an activist, coming to terms with yourself, transformation, going within the way of the world. And it really was a huge undertaking. And I've just been like recovering from, doing that in the past few months. But I really wanna go into like, you know, storytelling of film and comedy and characters, but I do a lot of commercial auditions. And I just like my question is pretty specific, but I'm sure some people can relate. It's like when you want to do so many things, but you're like, okay, I can't do everything at the same time. So my question is, if I make my most money from commercials, non-union, but I want to be getting the bigger auditions for the projects like that are real storytelling of films. How do you feel about like joining the union for non-union commercial actors and then pivoting from like doing a one-person show to working in film? Slash, how does the industry see one-person shows besides an accomplishment? But is it like, is there any pull with that? Because it's just a lot of directions you can go. So
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so first of all, congratulations. La
thank
Mama is a
you.
big deal, and a
Yeah,
one woman
A4 came, it
show
was very
is a
great.
lot of work, and I think it's huge, especially if it's a narrative about yourself. So that's a great way to like, invite casting directors and directors to come
Yeah.
see and learn a little bit about who you are. In terms of joining the union, I live in Florida. It's a right to work state. I will not join the union until I absolutely have to join the union.
Mhm.
And for me, that would mean, working more in markets like New York and LA that are not right to work. So that said, you're in New York, I would assume.
Mhm.
So you're in New York, which is not a right to work state. So at some point, you'll become a must join. So I would
Yeah.
say I would not join the union until you have to join the union, because if you are making your bread and butter off of non-union commercials, congratulations, that is still no easy feat. I would say like you want to keep that money going because you're still in front of casting directors. There are a lot of casting directors that do film, TV, and commercial, right?
Mhm.
They might see you in a commercial capacity and then think of you for something else specific that they might be casting on the film and TV side. And so I would say like I think you become a must join if you do like 3 SAG projects within 1 year or 5 projects over the course of 3 years. You can double check that with the SAG office, but they'll always let you know if
Yeah.
you've hit the number of projects where you become a must join. But I would say I would advise against it for now because you just don't want to lose that work if you're already working in
Yeah.
commercials. And then in terms of if you want to start doing more film and TV stuff, I think you have to start building those relationships. And also, you can start looking for smaller independent projects or even student films. So if you're making your money in the commercials, I would say just like keep doing that. And then I would start looking like, on Actors Access, on Backstage. I would start following, even just surfing the Vimeo staff picks for like the narrative short films, or looking at who are the directors who have the short film live action Oscar nominations or short lists. Like those are all directors, even though they're nominated, that are still kind of on the rise because they're doing short films, and reaching out to those directors and just saying like, hey, I love your work. People that are doing any kind of a short film, like on Vimeo staff pick or short. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like short of the week or short verse. Those are good places to look. But I would start looking for independent or student films. It's nice to do like MFA student films versus like first year student films, but just to start doing some of that stuff because then you'll accumulate a reel. You do 3 projects, you can start putting together an acting reel that's more film and TV focused. And then once you have that, you put that on your Actors Access, and then you put that on your Instagram, and then you have something to send casting directors. That and directors that kind of represents your work. I did a feature film many years ago, and I was so right for the role because they were looking for a real pregnant woman, but it was an acting narrative film, that they didn't even ask me to audition. They were like, "Do you have a reel?" I was like, "Sure." I sent them my reel. They're like, "Okay, great." And then I asked them because I like to know, like, "Oh, did you choose me because of the reel? How many people were in the mix?" And they're like, "No, you were our favorite, but we just wanted to make sure that there was some ability there." And then if you have, some good credits or they can see, we can tell a lot by a reel, in terms of the types of roles that you typically book and what your skill set is. And so I know I think I covered most of it. Hope that answers your questions.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting because it's like you you need footage to be pitched, but then it takes a lot of time to get footage. And I've been in a lot of films, and then it's like I have to like harass to get the footage, and I might
Yeah.
not ever get the footage. And I'm just like, okay. So I've made a lot of my own work, which is great. But then it's not like at a festival circuit, it's like my friends and me or whatever. So there is like does feel like there's like a catch-22 sometimes in the industry where it's like you need to have footage and relationships and to get better agents, to get in better casting director rooms, like you need to have experience, but in order to get experience, it's just like, okay. But we have to keep going as
Yeah.
actors and artists.
It is a catch-22, but I will say that, don't underestimate writing your own scene with a friend and then just hiring a good cinematographer and a good audio person and then just like getting it done. And then you can write the kind of scene that you want for yourself and use that for your reel. There's also places that specialize in making reels for
Mhm.
actors. Like there's, I think, Chop Shop in New York, or sorry, Crop Shop, Crop Shop
Yeah.
and like Reel Arc. And there's another one in Virginia that's like really great. And there's some in LA where you tell them the types of roles, they'll write something for you, they'll shoot it for you, you cast the other actor, and then maybe it's you and another actor splitting the cost of it or something like that. So those exist too.
Thank you
Um,
so much.
Problem.
All right, great. Next we have Cami and then Joyce.
Wait, I'm
Hi,
sorry. Before we
Isis.
do that, since we're only 3 minutes away, right? We're only 3 minutes from the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if everybody who after Cami, if you can drop your questions in the chat, perhaps we can get you answers to those. But I want as many people to have their questions answered as possible. So feel free to
Yeah.
do that.
Isis, are you able to stay on for just a few extra minutes?
Yeah, I
Would
can
that be
stand. I've got
possible?
like 10 more.
Okay, okay, great. We'll see as many as we can get through, but we'll then cut it off at 12 1:10. Okay, thanks all. Cami?
Hi, thank you so much for doing this. I have a question about when you're watching self-tapes. I know the first 10 seconds are like super important. What's like 2 to 3 things that you look for in those first 10 seconds that kind of help you like lean in to the actor and keep watching? And what are the other things that would pull you away from it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think for film and TV stuff, I always want to feel the moment before. I always want to, and I want to be brought right into the world of what the story is, whether it's like, because even if you're auditioning at a co-star level and you just have like one line, you don't just start from nowhere. You're doing something and then and then something occurs and you're responding to either another person or something that happened in the space or in the room. So I always want to kind of see the moment before and be brought like immediately right into the world, if that kind of makes sense on the film and TV side. On the commercial side, I think it's very much just about being yourself. And I know that that's sometimes it seems really simple, but you'd be surprised at how hard it is to just drop all the narratives of what you think they want and just show up and be yourself. But I think, yeah, so I think, yeah, so for, and I'll say for commercials, there's like the real people stuff, and then there's like the regular commercials. On the real people stuff, I really just want to see you be yourself and be true to who you are. And then like the other commercials that are a little bit more performative, then I would say I want to see the most polished version of yourself under the given circumstances of what's being asked in those instructions. Um, and I do think even now with a lot of regular commercials auditions, that kind of like moment before is really like important. So that you're coming from a place, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So it would be like physical things too, right? Like your outfits, and maybe even the background if you could shoot in the place, right? Like if it was like a kitchen, like a cooking commercial, you want them to shoot in a
Well, it
kitchen.
depends on what's being asked. Like on the real people side, if, yeah, sure, we would ask for you to be like, okay, like I want to see you, cutting some vegetables or something. But in a regular commercial, they would not want to see you in the kitchen actually cutting vegetables. That is something that would be, it would happen below the frame where it looks like I'm cutting vegetables. They're going to assume that I'm cutting vegetables, but I'm not actually like doing it, if that makes sense. Especially too, sometimes projects are like in person now, and you wouldn't ever want to like bring a knife to an audition or like bring a gun to an audition, a fake, that just, you're not gonna, there's a lot of controversial things about props, and that's like, it's a whole other hour-long discussion. But yeah, if that makes sense. And I do think that for the regular commercials, you want to have a blue background or a gray background, just like a plain background, even if it's just a plain wall, nothing distracting, good lighting, a good person reading for you on the other side.
Cool, cool. So you mentioned you like the humanity of like people, like how they show up. I
Mhm.
know I do a lot of commercial auditions and I got my start in immersive theater, so I'm very like improvisational. And sometimes I worry, especially with like the more polished commercials, and they're like, I want to see like, like 85% of it, I want you to stick with the instructions, but the rest we want to see you. And
Mhm.
I sometimes worry I'm improvising too much, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
How do I know, like, is there like a balance to it? Are we like, you have to, how do you stay within like
Yeah.
the constraints and know what you're
Well, I think for film and TV, the script writers have spent a lot of time working on those scripts. They're pretty attached to the words and the dialogue, and it's been through the ringer, and they really want it to be as is. That said, if you're doing like a 4-page scene, there's a lot more flexibility about like how you stick to the dialogue, and being really true and honest in the moment. They're going to forgive if there's a little bit of a paraphrase, but if it's like a one-liner, then you need to get that line right, because they want to know that like you can at least memorize like one line, and it's less about the performance. And for one-liners, it's more about like just like deliver the pizza. You know what I mean? Like you're there to push the rest of the story forward. You're not the center of the story. Whereas like if you've got a 4 or 5 page scene or two scenes, like it's you are an integral part of like the story. And then like for commercial, I think it varies again, project to project. Again, like when they tell you who the director is or who the client is, you want to go back and do your research. But I think, yeah, there is a balance. If they're asking for an improv very specifically, then be as free as you want. Um, but otherwise, if you're just adding your own improvisational moments, then I think you want to be more conservative with it.
Yeah, because I've done it for callbacks, and then I think I got like really into it, and I've noticed like the other actor be like, "Oh my God." Like there was like a reaction, like they were thrown. So I was like, "Oh, maybe I should have stayed more within the
Yeah.
like,
But again, I would
because I was
say
really
like
enjoying the improv."
I would just say like don't create narratives, because just because the other actor couldn't
Okay.
handle it, like maybe that's on them. You know what I
Okay.
mean? And don't second guess your own work. Just say like, okay, I showed up, I did the best I could.
Mhm.
These are the choices that I made, and then don't create a narrative about why you booked it or why you didn't book it, because you just never know what they want. But yeah, you are always looking to improve. And I would just say like in improvs, if you're working with another actor, then just stick to the basic like improv rules, which are very much like yes and,
Yeah.
and be as collaborative as possible. And those are tough ones, because if you're with someone who's like really skilled and really trained and really great at improv, then you're going to really be able to like play with them. And then if you have someone who like hasn't done that much improv, then it'll be a little bit trickier. So. Yeah.
Okay.
So I
Thank you
know
so
there's a
much.
couple more questions here. Yeah, but thank you.
Yeah, so Joyce had a question in that's in the chat. As a middle-aged AAPI actress, I look younger than my age, so I'm not sure how castable I am. Do you have any tips on how to be more castable for someone in their early 50s?
I mean, great question, and congratulations to you for looking so young and beautiful. I think we all we all want to age like that. I would say one, get rid of the mind frame that you're not castable because the second you think you're not castable, you're not castable. And actually, if you adopt the mind frame that you are castable, but for very specific types of roles, then you will become that way because casting directors or clients or agency or anyone who's looking to cast someone or hire anybody for anything out in the world, like you are the expert of you. And if there's any level of like lack of confidence or insecurity, then you're not going to come off as the expert of you. And we're going to feel that. And when we're casting, we just need to be so confident. Like, this is the right person. They're going to do an amazing job. But not only are they going to deliver on the work, but they're going to show up on time. They're going to be dependable. And then I would say, in terms of like, if we want to use that term like castability, I think you're totally castable. And I think if you look at, even projects out in the world right now, like I just saw No Other Choice, and then, like Crazy Rich Asians. And then, I mean, I think there is a lot of work out there right now. Um, and so I would say that like you casting directors don't have to know your age. In fact, with SAG, they're not even allowed to ask for your age. You'll just have headshots that look like you, and they're going to bring you in for roles that they think you are right for. And as long as you look like your pictures, then you should be right for the roles that they're bringing you in for. And then I think you just want to deliver on those auditions. And again, it becomes a little bit of a numbers game. Like the more you audition, the more chances you have of booking, etc. But like I'm looking at you right now, and I think you're totally castable, and I would bring you in for things, for sure. So yes. And then especially, like I said, what are the special skills? Do you speak any other languages? And often now, in terms of authenticity, they're starting to be very specific. It used to be like, we're looking for Hispanic actors, and sometimes they are looking for Hispanic actors, but now I've gotten specs where like they want Puerto Rican actors, they want Cuban actors, or they want Mexican actors. It's very specific. And the same thing across the API community. If they want someone, if they're casting a story about a Japanese family, like they don't want to slot someone in who's Korean, right? So they're looking for, again, like that authenticity. So I would say like really stand firm in like who you are and be clear about what your skills are, and just get in front of as many people as possible and the jobs will emerge.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Isis. So I think we're pretty much at time. I
I don't mind
Lisa,
taking these last two questions.
these last two questions. Okay. So I guess we have Juliet next, and then maybe one question from the chat, and then maybe for any other questions we can Isis, maybe we can see if we can answer them
Sure.
out, outside. Okay. Okay, Juliet, do you want to come off?
Hi, yes, I'm Juliet. I'm based in New York. Thanks for staying on longer. My question is, I just signed with the new manager and she's really into like real friend casting. So I'm curious, like your advice on like taking those pictures, what stands out to you, and then also when you're doing those auditions with friend groups, like how can you make it feel more authentic or more lived in? Like what is, I guess, your experience of gravitating towards like, oh, this is a great friend group. I totally, believe they're friends and want to cast them.
Yeah, I mean, great question. I cast for friend groups a lot too, and we always want diverse friend groups because when you're casting like four different people, it's like we want to tap into all the different varieties of people that live out in the world. And so that's one thing I always tell people. I'm like, one, we're leaning into diversity. So if you've got a diverse group of friends, like that is helpful in getting cast. And two, we also want your real friends. So hopefully your real friends are diverse and it's all just like, magic and fun. And then, in terms of like photos together, I think like, fun candids are great as long as we can see everybody's faces. And I think it comes down to the same thing again, like with the real friend groups. If you ever have to submit a self-tape with the real friend groups, which we've done in the past, it's fun to do things within the constraints of what the self-tape request is, to do things that are aligned with like what you guys actually do. And then yeah, and then the same thing with the pictures. If you're composing some pictures, it's like dress as you naturally would, within the constraints of commercial casting, so nothing that's like too skimpy, for example, because there's not a lot of, most brands aren't going to ask for you in a bikini unless it's specifically for a swim thing or, whatever. So I would say like be yourselves without being too like risque, I would say. And I would say if you're putting together a couple of different things, like there's some commercials where they're like super edgy, where they love like someone with, piercings and tattoos or blue hair or like gothic or like whatever. But then there's other commercials where they want more sort of conservative and casual looks. So I would throw together a couple of those too. Great question.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks, Isis. Just one more question then from the chat, which was around if there are any red flags. Are there any red flags someone should be looking for when reading a casting breakdown or job description they're considering self-submitting for?
Oh, red flags. Okay, that's a good one. I don't love when they're at if it's really low money and they're also asking for like in perpetuity, all media, all rights, like forever. I don't think that's great because you are then giving some low budget project the opportunity to use your image however they want. And now in the age of AI, that's a little bit of a red flag. If it looks like a larger budget project and it's saying that, then you could get to the audition phase and then have your agent negotiate to take that piece, to amend that piece out of the contract, so that then if they use your image past the initial terms, which are often a year or 2 years, then there's additional money that needs to be paid or it doesn't run anymore. So I would say I would say that's a big one. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Isis. Really appreciate you. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. I will be sending the recording of this session along with the text file of the chat so you all can keep in touch with each other. And then if there are any other burning questions, you can email them to me and we'll see if Isis has time to answer them. And then thank you, Isis. I'll also be sending Isis email over so you can get in touch directly if you want to share a little bit more about yourself. But yeah, really appreciate all of you. And yeah, thank
I
you.
will also say, you
Oh.
guys, you can find me on Instagram. So I'm just at my first name, last name at Isis Masoud. So I'm there, and you can also send me stuff there if you do any kind of reels or anything else. Like, I think that's a good place to just have your stuff because, again, sorry, last thing, if you engage with a casting director on Instagram, they might click through to see who you are. And if you have your reel pinned at the top or your headshots pinned at the top or some like comedy skit pinned at the top or you have your website in your bio or like just have some good pictures. Just the last thing I'm going to say on the real people side, sometimes people submit photos that aren't the best. And then I go to their Instagram and I just pull the photos that I'm like, oh, we need ones like this or like this or like this. So don't be shy to post photos of yourself on your Instagram. Okay, sorry. Last thing.
No, that's great. That's great. Thanks, Isis.
All right. Thank you so much for having me, you guys.